And now, it's time for TJ Wow.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Absolutely lovely to see you all here. Now, our webinar today is a little bit different from our normal TJ Wow webinars. It's still all about the conversation, so please use that chat window. It's really important to us that you use that to ask each other questions, that you network, you share LinkedIn, you share on Twitter. If you've got any articles or research that you've done or you know of, you share it with everybody. You can put hyperlinks in here. That's exactly what we want to do. Also, what we've got is on the left-hand side there, towards the bottom, we've got a question and answer pod. Please use that if you have any particular questions. If you think, oh, I don't want Joe to miss this question, you can go and use those. So hello, John. Hello, Con. And Con says it's a sunny 30 degrees today, and Con is in Melbourne in Australia. Yeah, you always make us jealous with that, Con. I'm not so sure about that. So if you think, actually, I'd like to say something and speak in the session, then absolutely fine. I can give you a microphone rights. Just use that raise hand icon at the very top of the screen and we'll go and have a play with that. Also, we're on Twitter. We have Debbie with us today. She is our editor-in-chief and she's on Twitter and she is using the hash TJWow. Hashtag to go and make some notes there. If you want to join in as well, please go and do so. Also, I know that our recordings are really popular with people. If you can't make it live, you can always go and have a look at those on our website. And this is the session today. As I say, it's different from normal. Normally we have 3 speakers, we have a facilitated conversation. Today, I'm sorry, you've just got me. You'll have to put up with me for the whole way through. But what we are talking about today is webinar technology, and it's really for looking at conversations and having the learning around that rather than delivering or broadcasting. Now, this was a session that I delivered at the online Educa Berlin conference towards the very end of last year, but we know not everybody can make it. So what I wanted to do was be able to bring that to you. So let me turn my webcam on. Hello everybody, and also let me tell you just a very slight hint about Online Educa Berlin and tell you a little bit about it in case you've never come across it. So Online Educa Berlin, or OEB, is all about it's all about learning and education, but it's about online education as well. And what we have with OEB is all sorts of different speaking sessions, of which I did a couple of those. And what you can see here is in the app that they had for Online Educa Berlin, these were the 2 sessions that I was doing. So I was very lucky to be going over there with Training Journal. This is one that I was speaking in with Charles Jennings that you can see there, all about 70-20-10 for some work that I've done through there. This is Charles again. He was one of the business stream leads. So what we had with Online Educa was there was a huge academic element further in higher education, and that was really interesting and really good. Also, what there was, though, was a business stream where all of the sessions, including the ones that I was working on, were very much around kind of the business topics. And Con, you say Charles is in Melbourne today, and tomorrow he is. He's doing some great sessions, I understand. Now, the session that I delivered, this is Jane Bozarth on the left, a US lady really into kind of all sorts of things about working out loud and using technology in appropriate ways. So we were doing our presentation together, and you may recognize Laura Overton from Towards Maturity in the middle there as well. And this was the session that we delivered. It was all about, we called it dodging the silver bullet, about choosing the right technology. And this is what I want to do, is bring my parts of this to you today. So let's come off webcam and go and concentrate a little bit more on what it is that we're doing here in the session. So the conversation was all about webinar technology, and I make a really important point here. It's not about webinars per se. In that chat window, just type a couple of words about the poor webinars that you go and see. What are they like? So I know there are good webinars, but what are the poor webinars like? There are webinars out there that aren't very good. So what happens in those poor webinars? What do you find? Dan says they're boring. Absolutely. Jennifer says they're nothing more than a video. They're not interactive. What else? How does it leave you feeling? What's your reaction to these poor webinars? Yeah, Paul's saying the same. They're not interactive, and we never worry about spelling or typing on things like our chat window. Oh, Dan, polls aren't relevant. That's interesting. A lot of people use polls to say, I need to do, quote, interactivity, therefore I'll put a poll in. I don't have any polls today, Dan. You'll be very glad to know. It's all about the right technology for the job. If the poll is right, brilliant, go and use it. But yeah, often they aren't relevant. Sometimes they're out of date. Ah, John, welcome from snowy Finland. And Jennifer, just as I end up looking at emails. And just as I've experienced plenty of poor webinars that were information dumps. And that's absolutely not how they have to be. We know they can be amazing, and there are amazing webinars out there. So this is all about using this technology, the software, the access, the ability that we've got with our webinars, but actually for learning opportunities. Paul says speakers can be very uninterested, and this projects onto the delegates watching. Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right, Paul. Hopefully, I'll grab your interest today and we'll move forwards. So then let's have a look. So this is me. I'm the deputy editor of TJ, and a lot of you know TJ already. You know that we've got our website with loads of materials, articles, videos, all sorts of stuff on. You know that we have a magazine. We actually, in the UK, we're the only print magazine around. You can also go and see that on our website as well. You can see those. And every December we have our really prestigious Training Journal Awards. It's absolutely glamorous. I'm not quite sure I fit in with the glamour, but I certainly do my best. It's where we celebrate success, and we kind of go and really give back and share all of those different things that people have been doing throughout the year. Now, one of the key things that we found at Online Educa is that people were having really high expectations, especially around technology. But actually, the reality was things weren't working all that well for them. What I'd like to know from you in the chat window, you've come along today for a webinar technology webinar. That's what we're doing here today. So it's reasonable to assume that you want to learn something new or different about ways that you can use webinar technology, different from a standard webinar, different from those things you've just mentioned. So what have you experimented with before and maybe hasn't quite worked? Is it something you've attended? Is it something you've delivered? Is it a piece of software that you've used and thought, oh, this really isn't very good? Is it maybe an approach where you've had one speaker in a PowerPoint deck and actually it's been quite boring? I don't know. Tell me in the chat window, or if you prefer, use that hand up icon and we can get you on audio if you'd like to try that out. So I know there's a couple of people here that probably have got good audio that will work. So if you'd like to join in on audio, please just use that hand up icon and we'll see if it works. So what for you are things that you've tried in the past and maybe haven't quite worked as well as you've wanted them to? Dan, you say very early days for us, which is absolutely great. It's all about where you are on your journey, trying to find the best technology that works for us. And that's a really important point, Dan. I always say we should start with the learning outcome, start with the business outcome. But actually the technology is a huge part of that too. So Dan, is that around, which platform do we use? So we're using Adobe Connect today, for instance. There are loads of other platforms as well. It could be around that. It could also be other parts of the technology too that we need to look at. Naomi, you say exploring the best technology available for my organisation. And again, technology we often think is the platform. Is it WebEx? Is it Adobe Connect? Is it Zoom? Is it Webinar Ninja? GoTo? Oh gosh, there's so many different ones. Salva Meetings, another one. Dan says the platform, and how would we use it in line with our brand and unique selling point? Now there's a really good point there, Dan, because what we're looking at then is, well, what's the point of doing this? I was chatting to somebody yesterday who's going to start up his own podcast. And I was like, well, that's great. What are you using it for? What's your unique selling point? What are you going to offer people that isn't out there already? Jennifer says, I use GoToWebinar or Zoom quite often, but usually with small groups. Just here for ideas. Well, welcome, Jennifer. I'm really glad that you're here. GoToWebinar, it's certainly, every piece of software has its plus points and has its minus points. And I include my favourites in there as well. Zoom has got some really nice features in it. I've just been experimenting on Zoom with a kind of green screen backdrop. So you can actually, a bit like if you're a weather girl or a weather boy and you have the maps behind you, that kind of thing. That's interesting. John says, I've tried a few platforms and I find that Adobe Connect works for me. P.S. I don't have shares in it. Neither do I, John, and it's one of my favourites too. John also says the key for me is smaller numbers and ensure that you've invited people who are really into the subject. Great learning points there, John. Thank you. Jeff says breakout rooms have been a big disappointment. I won't mention product names. Oh, fair enough, Jeff. Breakout rooms are a little bit of a challenge. Breakout rooms are amazing because what it allows you to do is, if you were running a face-to-face session, you'd probably say, here you are, guys. Here's a flip chart. Go off to the cafeteria or to another meeting room. And what you can do then is go and work for 10, 15, 20 minutes, 2 hours, and then come back together. And that's what breakout rooms do in online technology. But they all work in their own specific ways. They've all got their own nuances, and you have to really know what you're doing with the software to make them work properly. So I think that's probably the key, Jeff. It could also be other things with telephony and things failing as well. So last few points on this before we move on. Harry says, getting the interaction balance right. Too much and it can get distracting. Too little and it can feel like a big blank wall for the presenter. You've got a really good point there, Harry. And this is why the interaction is so important, because otherwise it can feel like you're talking at that computer screen, and you've got to do it from the very beginning. This is one of the very first things I asked you to do to get you interacting, hopefully to do for the rest of the session as well. John, who is our new editor on Training Journal, I'll introduce him properly in a moment, says Adobe Connect is one of the best. I think it absolutely is, John. But as always, it depends on what you want to achieve and your budget. Con, you say not many organisations are embarking on webinars can afford Adobe Connect. Thus, they're looking to get their feet wet first, maybe with Zoom or something like that. Yeah. Absolutely, Con. It's a great way to experiment. Adobe Connect and WebEx are comparatively expensive, primarily because they're comparatively wonderful. They've got the features and the stability. So they're different from other kind of other pieces of software because they've got that development there. So thank you very much for sharing those things. I think some really interesting stuff there. And we've got our own challenges. Let me tell you a little bit about the TJ challenges that we've got. First of all, there is a huge challenge in terms of our industry, because as you probably know with publishing, what we've got is a market that is just getting smaller and smaller. So have a look here. I'm going to share these links in the chat window with you so that you can go and find out more information if you want to. What you can see here is the circulations going down of some quite big magazines in the UK, at least Prima Baby, Men's Fitness, down by over 30%. I'm not sure about Mike the Knight, that bottom one. I think that's a kids' TV programme here in the UK. But you can see there's a huge challenge in our industry. The other challenge that we've got is actually annual growth in the UK market for publishing has gone down as well. You can see it's gone down by over 3% over 5 years. So we're in an industry itself which is actually kind of really struggling. Now, we've got a strong heritage here at TJ, which is really good. You may or may not know we're actually over 50 years old. I know we don't look it. I know we've got that youthful appearance. But actually, we've got a really strong heritage and we've got a lot of different things that we do. And that's really nice for us. But it still is a challenge. Now, a challenge we used to have, certainly at the time I was in Berlin in November, was actually, it was only me and Debbie. This is Debbie, our editor-in-chief, who's doing our Twitter back channel. And at the time, between us, we were working 4 days a week, putting out a magazine and a website and the webinars and all of the other things that we do. And that's, that's nothing. That is no resource at all. We did have some freelancers, but still 4 days a week for all of that is absolutely amazing. Luckily, we have our new editor with us now. So he's on the chat panel, so he can say a big hello. His name is John Kennard. You may know him. Oh, let me paste that link in properly. Apologies for that. You can go and look at his blog post on what it's like to be back in learning and development. He's been around for a few years himself, and it's lovely to have him back. So, and as Con says, the man is a legend. Yep, you're absolutely right, Con, and it's a joy working with him. So actually, we're back up to kind of full staff again, which is pretty amazing. But still, just like you, we've got a huge challenge with things like budget. So how about in the chat window, how many of you have got a free rein on your budget, have got all the budget that you need, don't have to worry about staffing, resources, don't have to go and ask for money? So how many of you are in that situation? Paul Burton says, I wish. Jeff says, in my dreams. Okay, I'm going to get a sense that probably we're all going to answer something similar to that. Yeah, some smiley faces coming through. Also, what you've got, if you wanted to, where that hand up icon is at the top left of your screen, there's actually a smiley face in there. If you click the down pointing arrow, you can choose that if you want to. Jennifer says, me, I'm the boss, but there's no budget. Yeah, I do know what you mean, Jennifer. So we've all got these budget challenges. Even if you've got a healthy budget, you've still got challenges with it and resources. We've also got a challenge with the audience, not the audience per se. The audience we have here at TJ are absolutely lovely. But what we've got, and here's some stuff from our media kit, telling you a little bit about the numbers of our audience from last year, and some of those have grown now, which is really good. But the problem is, it's really easy to be a broadcast website, and we didn't just want to do that. We really want people to interact with us in different ways through the magazine, the website, Twitter, the training journal forum, and that's what we wanted. We wanted engagement. That was the key for us. So going back to kind of what makes you different, why would you use webinar technology? Engagement was really important to us. So we didn't just want to broadcast the content. Now, how does this relate to you if you're in an L&D role? Certainly when I've been in L&D roles, I've been learning advisors and I've been sort of run learning areas for kind of Europe and stuff like that. It was largely broadcast of content as well. It was like a traditional menu of L&D courses. So they're very similar problems, I think, in that way. And that's where we need to move away from. Some of you are probably already moving away from that menu of learning content. Some of you might be kind of just starting that journey. And feel free to share that with us in the chat window. Now, what we've got here at TJ is an absolute passion to embrace technology. All of us have, myself, Debbie and John, all have that. And I think it's really important because that's the way our industry is going. It's the way our life is going about using technologies in different ways. And what we want to focus on is actually make this technology available to people. It doesn't have to be the biggest. It doesn't have to be the best, the newest, the most expensive. You know, there's no point in time at which TJ are looking at doing AI virtual reality sessions. I wish that would be pretty amazing. But actually, a lot of what we do is looking at, well, I've got an old iPhone. How can I use that to actually make a difference to what we're doing? So what we're looking at here is how can we actually unuse this technology for our audience and help people to understand what's there and what they can do today. So in a moment, I'm going to talk a little bit about the webinar style learning discussions that we have on our normal TJ Wow format. But also, it doesn't mean, you know, these things mean you have to be a technical guru. I think that's a really important point. Now, I'm going to speak on behalf of Debbie here, and I know she says this of herself. She's not the most comfortable with technology. She's not the most up to date. She certainly has the passion for it. She certainly wants to achieve things. Does it mean she gets it right? No. Does it mean I get it right? Absolutely not. And I'm going to share some corkers of failures with you in a moment. But the point is we give it a go. And the point is we use something that is attainable. And that's what I want to focus on moving forward. Let's have a look, though, about your organisation. I've shared with you some of the challenges we've got in our industry and what we wanted to do at TJ for our readers and our engagement. I'd like to talk you guys to think now about the problems that you have. So I've put a chat box up on the screen for you to go and have a look at. So think about your own industry, your own company that you work in, or clients that you work with. What are the context problems that you're seeing? So go and use that chat box on the left. What are some of the challenges you're trying to address? So I shared with you publishing is an industry that's struggling. I shared with you about we want to engage our audience, not just broadcast to them. In that chat box on the left, what are some of the challenges you're seeing for your organisation? So there's a chat box on the left. What is it you're struggling with, you're trying to look at in your organisation? So in the main chat, Jennifer has put time away from work. They want training but can't spare the time. Huge challenge. Con says embracing this medium, for example, webinars as a learning medium. And Paul says changing the culture. Absolutely. Now, some of you are typing in that left-hand box, which is great. And we're going to come back to that box in a moment. So actually what I'm going to do for Jennifer, Con and Paul, I'm just going to paste what you've said into that left box, just because I know from my plan I'm going to bring that box back a little bit later on towards the end of the session. I want to be able to refer to things. So we've got Dan saying growing pressure to do more for less. Clients are reducing budgets and how to address the learning needs with those constraints. Absolutely agree. And David says significant marketing spend by my competitors. Yeah, if they're spending money and you don't have it, how on earth can you compete with those things? Jennifer says also they perceive online learning to be of less value than class-based training. Oh, yeah, absolutely right. People think it's a poor second option just because we can't afford something face-to-face, we can't afford something in a real live environment. John says geography versus costs. It's a long way from Oslo to Trondheim, for example. Absolutely. Even, for example, yesterday, John, I went up to London for some meetings. Now, I'm not far from London. It's maybe 40 minutes on the train. But that was still kind of £25 for my ticket. It was still actually the whole day for basically 2 hours worth of meetings. Plus, you know, lunch and coffee, and actually that was quite expensive, and that's not even to do with training. So you're absolutely right, John. Naomi, you say there's a heavy workload, there are time pressures, getting staff to embrace the change in our delivery over multiple sites. Yeah, and there's some of the things that I'm going to touch on. So let's just see what Paul's got in here. He says changing the mindset of lawyers that training is just as important as fee earning. Oh, you might be on a struggle there, Paul. I've been in that situation a couple of times. Yeah, and the micro learning, if you want to call it that, the bite-sized learning, that's often the way. I have heard of people doing maybe half an hour webinars because that kind of fits in nicely, even 15-minute. They call them webinars, you know, using the webinar technology for 15-minute live learning sessions with fee earners, because that doesn't then impact on their fee earning so much. The way I understand it with most fee earners, lawyers, solicitors and so on, they have a certain target they've got to achieve every week or month, and if they every hour they're not fee earning, they're doing a learning course, for instance, actually they've got to make up that hour later on. Certainly in the companies that I've worked with, that's been the case. Okay, and Jennifer says, gosh, Paul, yes, I used to work with solicitors. I ended up training most lunch times. Yeah, so it's about knowing your audience all of the time. So I'm going to move away from this chat window in just a second, proving the value of having them versus the time taken to organise them. And Harry, that's a good point. I know, you know, we can throw together a webinar in half an hour, but they're usually not very good at that point. They're usually they feel thrown together. And actually putting them together properly does take time, and we need to make sure that we spend that time to get it right. So thank you very much for those. Let's have a look now at a potential solution. Certainly for the challenge that we looked at, we wanted to look at, well, how can we solve this problem of engaging with our audience more? And there are a number of things that should be done to address a need. There's never ever just one solution. For example, when we're at live events, we're using the Periscope technology a little bit more for live broadcast of video. And I'm sharing a couple of links in the chat window if you want to go and have a look at those some more. I know, Con, for instance, you're a huge proponent of live video. I know you absolutely love it. I can see you typing away there already. Also, what we do, OEB Periscope today from Charles Sessions. I didn't see that because I was prepping for this one, so I'll go and look at it a little bit later on. Also, we can use those videos then to promote on our own website. So we do that as like learning kind of nuggets. We also use our technology in a different way. For instance, I interviewed recently Elliot Maisie, and that whole interview is available for people to go and look at, or you could just look at the kind of the 2 or 3 minute sections that we pull out of that. So we're using that technology in various ways, and there are lots of other things that we can do. Oh, thank you, Con. Elliot did all the work on that, I promise you. And you can look at versions of this for your own organisation. Is this something you put through your intranet site? You know, we've got a public website we're doing this on, but you could do this on your intranet site, or a learning management system, or internal social networking, something along those lines. So let me tell you then a little bit about just one of the things that we did, which is our TJ Wow webinar series. So this was just part of the solution. And one of the things that we did was we made sure, as you can see here, we had our speakers on webcam throughout the whole session. So that was our facilitator, that's me in the top left, and we have 3 speakers. That's kind of the way we worked it. Just like today, we've got our chat pod we can use, we've got our question pod, and none of you have put any questions in the question pod yet. So if you want to, you're welcome to. You don't have to, of course, but you can go and use that if you want to ask any questions. Also, what we have is attendee microphones. Now, a lot of places don't do this, don't encourage people to speak. I know we haven't had anybody do that today, and I'll come back to that point a little bit later on. But the point is we encourage you and we ask you to do that because we want your voices in the session as well. What I want to do now is just share with you a video that highlights our format. Some of you may not have been on our TJ Wow webinars before, so let me just play you this video that tells you a little bit about it. Now, if you have been on our webinars before, just tell us in the chat window.
And now it's time for TJ Wow.
I think the conversation is really important. About engagement with line managers. Tell us more about your question.
Yeah, my challenge is more often L&D will play all the role it needs to do.
So that's just one example of the type of technology and the ability of technology as a mass communications mean and how it's evolving, which we haven't taken on within L&D yet.
How do we respond to people who say who are not saying, they're just going out there and just doing their own learning? I mean, how dare they? I mean, I've got a job to do, don't they know?
They're doing you out of a job, Suk. Well, I think it's a very interesting one. I was discussing this actually with Elliot Maisie yesterday. And Marie in the chat window has said the plan is not to be the learning police, but setting up the resources and mindset for people to engage learning in the workflow.
I think the conversation has been magnificent, and I think, and you would have seen the we're in the chat, I think we've got to start facilitating a new world of learning.
How do you tie into the organisation's strategic goals when they don't exist?
Bloody hell.
Thanks, Marie. We're all scratching our heads on this one. Oh, she said sorry. But no, I mean, this is a real challenge. So, guys, in that chat window, what are your thoughts?
People learn the most when they are being challenged, when there is something new to be achieved, and actually we don't really know the answer, so we kind of have to work.
Some of your action points you're taking away from the conversation we've had with Neil.
Somebody would be more human, and as an organisation and as a human being, personally, my mission is to make the world a little bit more human. I couldn't agree more. Hurrah!
Okay, so in that chat window, if you've been on our webinars before, what are your reflections on it? I'm not asking for compliments or praise at this point. I'm asking, what are you seeing? What have you got out of them? What have you liked? Maybe what have you disliked? And if this is a newer concept to you, if maybe you're joining today and haven't been on our webinars before, what is it you're seeing there? Is there something which you're liking, or actually you're thinking, I don't like that for this reason, or it's not right for me for this reason? Because as with all things, all models, all formats, it's only about what's right for an organization and for an audience, and it's about you taking those hints and actually kind of thinking, well, what's right for us? Con says the TJ Wow format is engaging. It keeps you interested. It's interactive. That's certainly what I hope for, Con. Thank you. Harry says, I think having the video element makes you feel more involved in the conversation. It's less us versus them. Well, that's an interesting point, Harry. I'd never thought about it that way, but thank you. I liked it because it was more, I guess, more real is a way to put that. But thank you, Harry. John says, I've been on one before and really enjoyed it. Sometimes, especially out there, we are in our bubble. Oh, especially out here, we're in our bubble. So it's great to listen to others, get some tangible ideas and tips. Excellent, John. Thank you. Jeff says, I haven't attended before, but really like the interaction. Thank you, Jeff. That's the whole point. It's about the conversation. That's what we're trying to pick up on. And we've had some great feedback on Twitter and other areas as well. And these are some of the success points that I want to share with you. Jennifer, you say engaging content, you feel included and valued. And I think that's a huge plus point. Thank you. Harry says, I agree, John. I always go away feeling lifted and inspired to use the tips and pointers. Oh, that's strong language there, Harry, but thank you so much. Now, you noticed in that video montage, I hope, there were no PowerPoint presentations in there at all. None whatsoever. And the format here, people are really loving. These are just a few of the tweets we've had based on this, about the format being really good, about using the chat panel whilst being a speaker, and just a refreshing, different approach from the webinars that we normally perhaps use. This is some of the feedback that we've had inside our live session. So this is all on our website, and you can go and have a look at this on one of our pages. John says, Joe, sorry, have to jump out of the meeting. You can come back and find the recording. Lovely to have you here, John. Thank you so much. So we've had some great feedback, and that's wonderful qualitative feedback. But also, we all know it's about the data, it's about the numbers. We need to include those things in there as well. And I think we've had some success in this way as well. And I think that's really important, to look at qualitative and quantitative. I think I'm going to stop saying that now. Feedback. So we've got an industry average for webinar attendance is around 30 to 40% of the people that register actually turn up. When we started our webinars, we did a launch week. So we always intended it to be one webinar a month, but we thought we'd start with a bang. And we did one webinar every day for a week. It was a lot of work, as you can imagine, but it was worth it. It was a great start. We had some great speakers, including a couple of people who are here. And our launch week had an average of 42% attendance. And we were really pleased with that. It was just above, or it was above industry average. But actually, for last year, our monthly average is 66% attendance. Now, that tells me that we're doing something right, because if you're not doing it right, people are not going to come back. You are not going to attract new people. So if that number was going down significantly, or anywhere below the 40%, anywhere above 40%, I am really happy. And thank you, Paul. Fantastic attendance and great results. I'm really, really proud of this, because it tells me I'm doing something right. It's always lovely to have compliments and feedback, and that is valuable. But seeing these numbers is just as important. So what are some of the components that we have chosen? I've mentioned already, speakers on webcam is really important. And actually On24 have done some research about this. And what they found was that in their research I think it was 2016, or it could have been 2015, but I'll share the link with you so you can go and have a look. But what they found was only 17% of webinars were actually having integrated video in the sessions. It didn't go into detail as to whether that was the whole session or just a part of it, but only a small proportion. And that is completely fair enough, because we have issues with bandwidth, we have issues with quality, things like, do people even want to be seen? What's going on in the background? Does it add any value? It's not always right. I don't have my webcam on in this session, for instance, because I don't think it adds value to see me the whole way through. But I did have it on at the introduction to make a more personal connection. Paul says, as well as the content, I think your attendance is owed to the personalities and the clear and concise organisation of the webinars you guys produce. That is really lovely feedback, Paul. Thank you. And it's certainly something we try to do. We try to stick to a format and promote it and work it in a certain way. And I'm going to come back to some of those points later. So we use webcam throughout. Also, it's about socializing our learning. This, I think, is another really interesting point. We have TJ Wow, so we get people kind of working on Twitter, and you can see some of the feedback that we've had on that. And also, it's about everybody learning as well. So this is a tweet, for instance, from Neil Gavin, and he put together a Storify. Now, if you don't know Storify, it's about bringing together social media content into kind of one place to tell the story of maybe an event or something that happened. And I've got a link to share with you there, and it shows you the story that was put together. Con says, what was that Buggles song? Video killed the radio star? Well, you just proved that video will lead the learning revolution. Ah, thank you, Con. I seem to recall, Con, you wrote an article for TJ around that. I don't have the link immediately handy, but you can go and look on the TJ website and share that if you want to. Now, the other thing that's interesting with this, in terms of what Paul was saying about the content, the clear and concise organisation, what we took was a marketing approach, a kind of a campaign approach to our webinars. So for instance, what you may have seen if you've come along before, if you've been attending a while, is you may have seen the technical check or the video introductions with our speakers. 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes available for you to go and see me just saying hi, hello to whoever our speaker is, and what they do, and just headlines about the topic that we were discussing that month. And we promoted those through social media. We also promoted those on our website, where we had our webinars page, where you can go and click on the link to see what people are talking about. I really liked this because it was a great way to introduce our speakers. It was we were doing a technical check anyway, so it was a great way to make the most of that time. And Debbie's just shared Con's article about video kill the learning star. Thank you so much, Debbie. And also what we found is that people were watching those introductions. They were doing things like actually being able to get onto Adobe Connect themselves. So that was a good technical element for our attendees. They were getting used to the style and the format that we were doing. So it was a good introduction from that point of view. And in the webinars, people were referring back to them. So people would say, oh, hey, Bob, you know, in your introduction, you mentioned such and such. I've got a question about that. And that was really valuable. I do have an update on that though. So this is certainly what we were doing up till about November. Since then, I'm not actually doing this anymore. And that might surprise you. If I'm saying it was so brilliant, it might surprise you that I'm not doing this now. Primarily, there are a couple of things. The viewing numbers of those introductions went down. There were hardly anybody watching them. And in terms of the amount of time and effort to put together, recording it, publishing it, promoting it, if you're not having people looking at it, obviously it's not worth doing. People don't want it. That's what I was hearing. And actually, what it turns out, it was great for publicising the series generally. But we started this in May last year. And what I interpret this as is people are used to it now. People don't need that part of it now because they understand what this is about, largely. We're always getting new audience. I don't want to cut off new audience. But it just wasn't as popular as it was before. So actually, I'm not doing this anymore. But if you're doing something internally, if you're going back to some of those points you were making before about change, this is a great way almost to market and campaign a different way of learning. And certainly it was successful for us. And you could do this on your learning management system, your intranet site, your social media site that you might have. So it's a really great thing to start off with. We did it for a good 6 months, I think, before we kind of decided not to do it anymore. The other point that is really important with any learning is, what are you going to do with it? So what we started doing a few webinars in is I kind of had a bit of a reflection myself and thought, well, our webinars are getting great feedback and great numbers, and we're having great quality conversation, but actually, is it changing anything for anybody? So what we did is at the end, we just had this, or action point, we just had a whiteboard that the people went and wrote on. It's available on all of our web pages, all of the webinar recording pages, so people can look at them. And it just makes people think about the next step. I'm not doing this exact one today. I'm doing a different version of this today, but that's something I've done. And it's got some good feedback as well. Now, as with everything, we might have had some successes, but I tell you what, we've had a few learning points as well. I could call them failures. It's all about how you learn from them. So let me share a few of those with you. One of them was promote early. That's a really important point. So one of our webinars had 100% attendance. So in the chat window, what do you think of that? 100% of the people that registered attended our webinar. What are your thoughts on that number? Wow, says Jeff. Yeah, it's a wow moment. I was really happy with that. 100% of people who registered attended our session. Con says, I've never seen that before. Me neither. Dan says, nice work. Yeah, I'm going to pause you on your compliments now, guys, because actually I only had 5 people registered. So that's because I promoted it late. So David, actually, I was kind of a bit misleading there. I'm sorry. What happened was, basically, I mucked up. I didn't promote it in time. I'll hold my hand up. I was rubbish. We only had 5 people attended. 5 people registered and they attended. So that 100% is very misleading because I promoted it late, basically. Although, again, I've experimented, and I've actually experimented and found that the email going out the day before the webinar has actually got loads of registrations. Emails sometimes going out too early doesn't get many registrations. So it's about experimenting and knowing your audience all the time. How early is early, says Dan. Oh, that's like, how long is a piece of string? Twice the length from the middle is the smart answer to that. It really depends on your audience. So I have found the week before is okay. Anything more than the week before I find is too early for our public webinars. So you might be doing something different if this is internal. You might need a longer lead time. The other thing we have is we always have 2 or 3 webinars in place, dates and times on our website that you can go and register for, so that people that do want to plan ahead can. So go and experiment is my recommendation and see what comes up. Now, going back to that point that I was making about the video introductions, format changes take time. So my recommendation to you is, if you want to change anything in your organization, you need to get a reputation. You need to get people talking about what's going in your organization, in your learning network, and so on. Dan, you ask, do you find those that don't attend access the recording? The short answer, Dan, is yes, I do find that they do that. I don't have any numbers to back that up at the moment. I haven't done the reports on that, but I think yes is the short answer. I find that because people talk to me about it later, they tweet about it, they write about it, and also I have seen some of those numbers on the recordings, but I haven't done a report on it. My pleasure, Dan. You have to, as I've said, know your audience. I was doing lots and lots of social media promotion of these webinars, and going back to that kind of 5 people registering, actually I wasn't getting that many people registering. For the TJ webinars, for the TJ audience, actually our email mailing list was the key way to get most of our attendance and our registers. Not the only way. So Jeff is a great example. You've been recommended to come here today by Con, so I thank both of you, and it's lovely to have you here. But most of our audience comes through our mailing list. So you've got to know your audience. And I didn't know that until I experimented. And by experimented, I mean mucked up and did it wrong and didn't do it right, and then kind of went, oh, well, actually, I forgot to do the social media stuff, or I forgot to do the email, and we've had no registrations. And then I've had to do the email late because I hadn't done it properly. And then actually I did it the day before one day and we got loads of registrations. So I'm being really honest with you. I did it through mistake. I did it through error, through not doing a very good job, I think. But it's got learning out of it, and that is the point. So David, what is your question that you've asked here in the question and answer panel? You are adept at using this technology, but I guess that will have taken a lot of practice. Is there a test environment for practice? And yes, there is. So yes, I have done a lot of practice at this, and this is my huge specialism. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I have specialised in this in David. But that's not to say that people who aren't specialists in this can't use it. It's about learning, it's about practicing. And you can practice this on your own with a second computer. If you look at the top right of your screen, you can see I've got Joe Cook, that's me. And there's Joe Cook 2, that's my second computer. That's an attendee. I can just play with it and see what happens. You can use it with your colleagues. You can use pilot audiences. If you don't give the link to anybody, they won't get here. So absolutely go and test and practice. So also another thing that we can look at is certainly the format that we use is around a conversation, and it's asking a really good question right at the beginning. And this is what we do every month. We ask a question, we start with that, and we just see where the conversation goes. You could have a format where you ask 2 or 3 questions, or you plan some of that. We don't. We start with that question and we react to the question panel. We react also to the chat pod. That's how we do things. Jeff asks, have you ever sent email shortly before a webinar as a reminder? Now I typed in there no, Jeff. I should have typed yes. I should have read the question properly. So yes, I tend to, again, I've experimented, had problems with and not done it right very well. There are automated email reminders that go out for the webinar, and I've experimented with that. The ones the hour before haven't worked so well. I find half an hour before the automatic reminder is brilliant. But who was it, Harry? I think you had a problem today where you were saying, where's the link to my webinar? And it was in your spam. So that's something you have to contend with. And also, much as I love Adobe Connect, the email reminder system in it is, oh gosh, I'm sure you have to be a rocket scientist to be able to work it out. I have struggled with that a little bit and had errors, and that's had impacts on things. But the reminder is really important. Now that question I found is really important as well. We had one session where, again, I just experimented, and it's all about, you know, Debbie and I, when we were doing this, decided to take a fail fast approach. The idea of let's experiment. If it doesn't work, we won't do it again. If it does work, brilliant, we'll carry on. This is a webinar we did where I didn't set a question. I just had a topic. I thought it was going to work okay because a previous webinar had been similar. But actually, you know, it was still great conversation. It was still great learning. But was it as good as the ones where we had specific questions? I don't think so. I don't think it was as focused. Certainly that was my reaction as I was facilitating. And when I watched it back, it just wasn't as focused. So I decided not to do that again. But we experimented with it. And lastly, the very last point is about knowing your software. It's about choosing the right software for you in the first place. And Debbie will tell you, I stamped my feet and I had a tantrum. I wanted Adobe Connect, and she was very lovely, and she managed to talk the powers that be into investing in it because it's not cheap, because it gives so many features. And I'm not here to do an Adobe Connect pitch today, because it's also about what you've got. So in the company already was GoToWebinar and GoToMeeting, and I had a look at those. And it was actually, you know what, we can still have people on webcam. We can still have chat windows. It doesn't have some other things I want to do in it, but it's fine. So I'm all about use what you've got, use it well, use it creatively, and know it really well. Because you've got to be able to set it up, you've got to manage it, you've got to encourage people. If something goes wrong, and I've crashed out of more sessions than I care to tell you, then you have to know how to fix it. Hence, for instance, I've got 2 computers. I can just jump onto that other one, unmute, and carry on if I need to. So you need to know your software really well. It doesn't matter what it is. And that includes things like the email reminders that I was just mentioning and knowing how to do that. I've been talking an awful lot. Let me summarize, and then we're going to go into some questions, and we're going to go into kind of what are you going to do after this. So in summary, some of the things that we've been looking at are success points. We found for our format, things like having no presentations, using webcam, socializing the learning and using that campaign approach, and adding in the reflection and action pieces as we went along was really important. Some of the other things we found: promote early, but not too early. Any kind of launch or different format takes time to change, and I've talked through that journey a little bit. You have to know your audience in terms of how they get to you, what do they want, how are they interacting. As I've just explained, asking a good question and knowing your software. Khan asks in the chat window, so Joe, if I was thinking of embarking on the webinar track for my organisation, should I try and do it myself, as in buy the software, train myself, trial and errors, or should I outsource it? Oh, now that is a really good question, Con. It will depend on so many things, including your time, your budget, how interested you are in doing it, how tech savvy you are. And it's not just tech savvy. Yes, there's a layer of technology, absolutely. But it's actually how good a presenter are you? How good a storyteller are you? How good a speaker and facilitator are you? So yeah, go and do it yourself if you want to, absolutely. If any of those things are a bit tricky for you, then yeah, go and outsource it or work with someone to get the best out of them, build up your skill and experience and move forward. Paul, you've got to run, no worries, thank you. And I will come back to that comment a little bit later on. Thank you very much for that, Paul. The question I've got for you after, at the end of this session, we've got about 8 minutes left, is what is it that you can implement from what we've talked about here? So let me change the screen for you. Well, I think I've got a question in the question pod I'll come back to in a moment. So on the screen, I've got the summary. On the top right, I've got those problems that you mentioned earlier on. So I've got those there to refer to. In the top left of the screen, just share some ideas here from what we've talked through today. What are some of the things where you're thinking, I could maybe do this? I'm not suggesting you do exactly what we've done. That's not necessarily right for you. We did this specifically for our audience and our needs. But you've got some success points, you've got some learning points. What are some of the things that you could possibly take away and implement? So you've got some summary at the bottom there of what I've talked through today. And just as a reminder, you've got those challenges that you're dealing with in the top right-hand corner. So from our session today, what I've shared, what we've chatted about in the chat window, what are some of the things that you're thinking, that's a little learning nugget. That's something I'm going to take away and try. So Dan, don't worry, I haven't missed your question in the question pod. I will come back to that, I promise. Pleasure, Dan. So let's look at that top left chat window. What's coming in there? Dan says, need to find the right platform and try some stuff. Yeah. And love the idea of fast fails. Yeah, I think it's my backup option for when I don't do things right, Dan, if I'm honest with you. But no, some of it is experimentation. And even if it's an error, as long as you learned from it, that's the point. Jeff says, it's highlighted for me the importance of planning the process in detail, especially promotion. Absolutely, Jeff. I'm not saying we've got it right you know, I was talking to John, our new editor, even just yesterday, and going, well, we've tried this, we've tried that, we could do this, we could do that. Let's just put a plan in motion, try it, look at the numbers, look at the responses, look at what people are saying, and then adjust and adapt from there. David says, I'll be exploring the use of webinars as a tool for promoting face-to-face training. Interesting, David. Oh, I do hope you tell us a bit more about that. You're always welcome. We're always looking for great contributions and sharing of learning on training journals. So please do get in contact, David, and maybe share with us how you're doing that, what you're finding, just like I shared with you today. It would be great to hear about that. And I think that's a really interesting piece where you can be interviewing people, you could have short sessions that you do around topics to complement what's going on face to face, all sorts of stuff there. Okay, getting quite excited there, David, thank you. Jennifer says, I'm going to change reminders to half an hour before and see if it helps boost live attendance. I also love that you separate questions and topics from the chat window with the equal sign. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So quite often I do that. It's a really nice way of saying, right guys, go and put something in right now. And also from a facilitation point of view, it means I just need to look back to that point, especially if I just put loads of things in the chat window here. You know, I just have to look back to that point and I can see a clear separation. And the separate questions is really good, especially if you have a busy audience. And it's only me today. You might have a producer or a co-host or a co-facilitator. It's also really useful to make sure you don't miss questions. Con says, give it a go, have a play, try it out. But more importantly, keep participating in other people's webinars to learn new tricks. Absolutely. And I do that as well, Con, all the time. I'm always learning from other people's. P. Lung, you say, knowing my audience and know what is the best way to promote and when is the best time to. Brilliant. And Harry says, I think your video montage of the TJ Wow series is a great way of engaging people and giving them a glimpse into what they're all about. Quick and efficient snapshot for marketing and promotion. Brilliant. And it's about then applying that to your own area. Thank you so much. Let me just bring this question pod onto screen, answer Dan's question that we've got here. What Dan asks is, for inputs of new theory, information, etc., what kind of alternatives do you recommend instead of presentations? Now I've put there, that's a big question, Dan. I'm not saying presentations are bad or wrong at all. We just decided on a particular format for these type of webinars. And today I've done a presentation. That's what I've done today. They're not bad. What I would look at is a blend. So can you send them documentation, web articles, videos, whatever, before whatever the learning intervention is? Because you shouldn't be using your learning intervention purely for knowledge dump. You should be using it to grapple with whatever this new information is. So can I read the document, watch a video before, and then in the session discuss it, have activities, have discussion points around whatever that new information is for? That's what I would recommend you have a look at. Now we are at time. I cannot believe that an hour has gone so quickly. As before, all of our sessions are available on our website. You can go and have a look. My pleasure, Dan. Happy to talk about that more if you want to. And you can find me on Twitter if you want to, or just through the Training Journal website. All of our webinars are available for you to go and have a look at. You know by now we're on Twitter, and Debbie, our editor-in-chief, has done an amazing job capturing all of this on Twitter if you want to go and relive that and have a look. We've also got our Training Journal forum. If you've got questions, we've got, gosh, 5,000 people on our Training Journal forum. Go and ask some questions, including on this topic, and we can get a discussion going and some learning points. And as for our next webinars, well, we've got 2 coming up. One next month is all about talent, and the one the month after is about the skills agenda. And you can go and register for those now if you want to. They are all 10 AM UK time, which hopefully works across kind of the rest of the EMEA and Australia as well. That's the end of our session. Thank you so much for coming along. You've been absolutely fabulous. You've been really interactive. You've had some great ideas that you've shared. You've been really honest as well. So thank you so much for that.